Hello, and welcome to Talk to Downtown. My name is Courtney Wood. I'm the Economic Development Director for the Downtown Stockton Alliance, the 501c6 nonprofit property-based business improvement district serving downtown Stockton. This webinar series is intended to connect our business owners, property owners, visitors, and residents with the organizations, people, and resources who can help address issues which are of top concern to them. Today, we have special guest Kate Hutchinson. She is the San Joaquin County Continuum of Care Board Chair. So she's going to talk to us about the work of the COC and how they are working to solve homelessness in our community. So it's going to be a very interesting webinar today. I'm very excited to talk to Kate. Welcome, Kate. We'll begin by allowing Kate to go ahead and introduce herself and share a little bit about her role as the board chair of the San Joaquin County Continuum of Care. And after that, I will ask my list of questions I've outlined for her. And at the end, we will open up for the viewers. So if you do have a question, please type it in as a comment. Okay, so with that, welcome. Thank you so much for being our guest today. I'm excited to learn about all of the work that you guys are doing to address homelessness in our community. And with that, please let us know a little bit about yourself, your background, and your role on the COC.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to the community about the work of the COC. I'm the Deputy Director for Lutheran Social Services. We have programs that we operate in San Joaquin County that are funded by HUD. And so it was my turn to step up and become the board chair of the COC, the San Joaquin Continuum of Care. So my role as the board chair is to convene the meetings, but also to make sure that all of the programs that are funded through the COC meet HUD goals and requirements so that we're sure to keep that funding secure.
Thank you. Okay, so now let's dive in. Can you give us a brief overview of what exactly the Continuum of Care is, just in case anyone is not familiar? Share with us what are the goals of the Continuum of Care and what do they oversee? What are their duties, responsibilities?
Yes. So the COC is an all-volunteer group of homeless providers, local governments, people with lived experience, and stakeholders that are committed to ending homelessness in San Joaquin County. The COC is mandated by HUD. So in order for HUD to distribute funding, they want to make sure that everybody has a voice in how that funding is spent. The COC monitors that funding that comes down through HUD. We monitor the quality of services that are provided through this funding through an annual review process. And we promote access to services for people who are homeless through coordinated entry. In our particular COC, which is very active, we also have an education committee, an outreach committee, and strategic planning committee. And so all of us are working together to take one chunk of the work toward ending homelessness and work on it on a monthly basis. The county administers the COC funding, so that the funding, that's how it's funneled through. So hopefully that explains a little bit.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the work that you're doing and the work that the group is doing to help address homelessness in our community. It's an important issue. So regarding membership and attendance of these meetings, who can attend, when are the meetings, and if someone is interested in potentially, joining the Continuum of Care as a board member, how could they do that?
So we're organized as a board, as general membership, and then into committees. And any member of the public can join in on any of the meetings. So the board meets monthly, and the committees have their own monthly meetings, and then the general membership meets quarterly. The best way to get info about when the meetings are is on the COC website. So it's sanjoaquincoc.org. And that lays out all the committees, their structures, their goals, the board meeting times and dates. And then if you're interested in being included on the list, the long email list that I send out monthly, you can do so through the website. Just just type in your info and we'll get you on the mailing list.
Thank you. And so, in order to be a member, are there any kind of points of criteria that people need to meet, or can they just be interested in working to address homelessness?
So anybody who's interested in addressing homelessness can come to the board meetings or the general membership. We do have a process for selecting board members through a nominating committee. And usually we're looking for people who have experience in the field of homeless service provision or expertise in working with HUD. We want to make sure we're representing the various cities within San Joaquin County and have a mixture of some business, some service provider, and some people with lived experience.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for sharing. And hopefully if anyone is interested in even just attending those meetings, go to what Kate mentioned and find out more about when they're taking place. Okay, so now let's talk about the work of the COC. Can you tell us what have you guys accomplished just since your time as board chair?
Well, one of the main jobs of the COC every year is to go through what's called the HUD competition. It's an annual competition where anybody who's interested in applying for HUD funding applies, and the COC is responsible for reviewing those applications, making recommendations to HUD, so that's one thing that that we have successfully completed in the time that I've been the chair. We've also started our implementation with the coordinated entry system. And that's important to our community because it's a way that we make sure that referrals into shelters and housing is fair and equitable. So if someone is homeless, they're evaluated by the coordinated entry system. Their name is placed on what's called a by name list. And then when an opening comes up, we take their name from that list based on their vulnerability and their need. So that's a big project to get that implemented countywide, and that we're well underway. There's also been quite a bit of funding that's come down through the state and through a program called HAP. Don't ask me what that stands for. Part of the continuum is to identify gaps and needs so that we can identify the best places to spend that HAP funding. HAP 3 and 4 will be upcoming. You may have heard that Gavin Newsom put a hold on distribution of that funding recently. So waiting to see how that gets resolved, and there will be requests for proposals that will be put out when that funding becomes available. And then the other big thing that I've been really interested in and that we've started work on is increasing our study of equity within the homeless services that are provided. So across the nation, there's a greater proportion of African Americans who are homeless. There's a greater proportion of women women of color with children who are homeless, and we're looking at ways in our community about how we can address that. And I think the first step is to identify it, and then we work on addressing.
Very interesting. Yes, so I'm sure it's quite a bit of work managing all the funding coming, funneling through the continuum of care, deciding who's going to receive that funding, and very happy to hear that you guys are doing some work on equity as well. Mm-hmm. Is there any particular project that you are most proud of?
Well, one of the things I'm really proud of is that we've expanded the number of agencies that are now receiving money through HUD. That was important to me. And then also that we really made great strides in implementing coordinated entry, because that's kind of a linchpin to making sure that services are equitable.
Yes, since you've kind of mentioned it a couple of times about the coordinated entry, and I do know about the HMIS. We use it for some of our data that we receive from our portable bathroom and shower unit. I am curious, so like, how have you made it easier for the system, for maybe different organizations to communicate within the system, or for it to accurately track our community? Because I know that's been a challenge, is really making sure everyone's on the same page as to who's identified as someone experiencing homelessness. What do we know about them, not duplicating information. So tell me a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so I think the key word that you said there is not duplicating, and that's the main thing that coordinated entry accomplishes, because when we're listing people by name, we know that, and we're tracking where they're going in the system through HMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System. We can track them through the system better, but it is a challenge. It's a challenge in every community, and I think coordinated entry is not one of those things that you ever achieve. It's one of those things you're always working on. So just getting it up and off the ground, and working out bugs as they come along over the next 5 years, it will be an even more full and equitable system for moving people from the streets into housing.
Excellent. It's a super important tool. So glad to hear you're working on making it the best it can be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Given the work that you do, what is the most common question that you are asked about homelessness in San Joaquin County? And how would you answer that question?
I guess the most common question is, why are there so many homeless people? And why do we see so many people in tents? And I guess the answer is we're working on it. I believe the big issue that we have in getting people off the streets is we just don't have enough affordable housing in our community. Over the pandemic, rents increased in San Joaquin County by 13%. So you can imagine, if you're living on the edge already and then you have a ginormous rent increase, it makes it really difficult. We have been using the funding that's been coming down to us to make investments in expanding permanent supported housing, supporting building affordable housing. Many new projects have already opened. I was at the Victory Gardens ribbon cutting, was it a week or two ago? That was super exciting. But it's going to take time. It took us a while to dig ourselves into this hole, and it's going to take us a while to dig ourselves out, because it takes time. Even if you have all the funding, it still takes a couple of years to build the housing. So I guess, circling back to your questions, like, what do people ask? Why are there so many homeless people? The short answer is there's just not enough affordable housing, and we're working on it.
Good answer. Just kind of off the top of your head, if you had an idea of how many more affordable housing units you wish that the county had, what would that number look like to you?
I don't know if I could answer that question off the top of my head. It's going to be thousands of units. And this is maybe where coordinated entry could help us. So if we have a good built out list of who's homeless, we'll know how many units we need. It's going to take a lot. It's a community wide effort. It has to be, we need to have some people who are willing to say yes in my backyard.
Yes, I totally understand. So thousands of units needed. Hopefully we can make that happen. How would you say that homelessness in Stockton compares to homelessness in other areas of the county, or even just in other areas of Northern California?
I think that I think one of the things that we've found with homeless people become homeless in Stockton, and they stay homeless. There's the residents of Stockton who become homeless and they stay in Stockton, and I think the same is true for other communities throughout Stockton. And I know that's true across the state. That is what we see. So when you see a high concentration of homeless people in your city, those are your neighbors. Those are people that have lived in the city for a while. And what that's telling you is there's not enough affordable housing in my community. Yeah.
Yes. Wow. Okay. That is an interesting fact. I do think sometimes people assume that some of our homeless population is coming from other areas. They're traveling here, but you're saying no. It's people who, they lived either in apartments or homes before, and now, for whatever reason, they've been pushed into homelessness and they've stayed here. So thank you for sharing that fact. I think it's important to know and for people to understand who's here. So I know the continuum of care works on something called the point in time count, and I know that it's very important for our community so that we can kind of get a survey of who's unsheltered in our community, how many are there. That way we can receive appropriate funding to assist those people. What can you tell us about the most recent point in time count? What were the results? Has anything changed since the last point in time count? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the point in time count, I'll just give you a little historical perspective. The point in time count is required by HUD in order to get a snapshot of homelessness in each community. And it's generally conducted on one day in January. And it's conducted on that same day across the nation.
Wow.
And so the idea is, I think one of the myths about the point in time count is that we're really going to get we're going to be able to count every single person. I mean, and honestly, that is just impossible. So the way that the point in time count, it's organized so that it happens every other year, and now we're on even years. We skipped a year because of COVID. It is another one of those. It's a ginormous all volunteer effort. So it takes a lot of planning and resources to identify where homeless encampments are, to train up teams of volunteers, and then teams of volunteers go out. Usually in San Joaquin County, we go out early in the morning, like 6 a.m, out to the encampments. And you want to either go early in the morning or at night so that you catch people in their encampments. And then we both count and we interview. And so when we're interviewing people, we're asking, where are you originally from? What, and that's where we know it's like, oh yeah, they came from we ask, what led to your homelessness, and we ask them what can we provide you with resources and referrals. So it's then all that data is collected, and it's compiled, and it's part of what we report to HUD every year. There are funding decisions that are based on the PIT count, but I've never felt like the funding decision has been so critical. It impacts, but it doesn't. It's not like, 10 less homeless people, you get $10. There's not a one-to-one correlation. So what our pitch showed this last year was a decrease in homelessness, and that's been super controversial, right? Because it feels like you can see more homeless people on the street. So yeah, I think we haven't fully analyzed what that points to. But one thing I would say is that if anybody's interested in participating in the point in time count, we'll start planning for that in the fall of 2023 for a PIT count in 2024. And like I said, we usually deploy hundreds of volunteers. We train and deploy hundreds of volunteers to go out to the camps. And it's an effort with city police, the county, the city, the homeless workers, all identifying the encampments. And I would encourage people to get involved. It's one of those life-changing experiences when you go out in a count. So.
Oh, I'm sure it would be a very eye-opening experience. Really talking with these individuals who are struggling with homelessness, hearing their stories. So definitely, if anyone's interested, and how can they get involved if they do want to volunteer? Where should they go?
So again, go to the website, to the Continuum of Care website, and just send a message. I'm interested in volunteering in the pit. I'll ask too, as you were, I think that one of the things that really impacted me most the first time I went out on a pit count was really having conversations with people. So a lot of times we talk about the homeless, but it's very different when you meet a person and you hear their story and you see that those all those tents you see represent people who are living in conditions that aren't made for humans to live in long term.
Right. I think it's very different, once you get those individual stories, kind of really taking the time to understand. Everyone has their story, everyone has unique circumstances, factors that played into them being homeless in many cases, forced to be homeless because there's no other option based on what's happened in their lives.
Right.
Very, very interesting and heartbreaking in some cases. Or in terms of prevention, so preventing people from maybe getting into that kind of a situation to where they have no other option besides sleeping on the streets or sleeping in their car. What is the Continuum of Care doing in order to kind of identify and provide preventive support to individuals who maybe are experiencing things in their lives that make them at risk for being pushed into homelessness, unwantedly. So maybe they're struggling with mental health or substance abuse or poverty or other issues. What kind of identification and prevention is the Continuum of Care working to provide to our community?
So this is where you kind of have to take back. So the Continuum of Care isn't providing the direct services. So agencies that comprise the continuum are providing the direct services, and different agencies, particularly those working with transition age youth, have programs that are more geared toward prevention. I think that with funding that comes in the future, that idea of we refer to as moving upstream. So right now we're in crisis mode. We're working with people who are already homeless, but to be able to move upstream to prevent homelessness is really critical. And I would say I would advocate especially for young adults, because one of the studies that was conducted by Chapin Hall, if you're interested in researching that Chapin Hall has done some great studies about homelessness, shows that I think it's 63% of the adults who are homeless had their first incidents of homeless when they were between the ages of 18 and 24. So if we can nip that in the bud and work toward helping 18 to 24-year-olds finish their education, develop the skills that they need to live independently, I think, prevention-wise, that would go a long ways.
Definitely. That's something I've always been curious about, because it seems like once you've fallen into homelessness, and even if it lasts a year, I see it as probably a lot harder to come out of than at least if you could do something to help prevent it. Do you know any organizations that you could think of that are doing that kind of prevention, maybe to help youth or other people at risk?
Yeah. So my organization, Lutheran Social Services, does quite a bit. Aspiranet does some. The Women's Center has some great programs. So there are quite a few programs that are addressing the needs of transition age youth. And we also have a really active youth advisory board, or it's our YAB in our world. We call it the YAB. And the youth advisory board advises the Continuum of Care about services and programs that we should be, or we should consider to provide to youth.
Thank you. Thanks for those recommendations. If someone watching this, who's come across this video, feels like, wow, I really am very close to being pushed in a situation that would, make it so that I need to live on the streets or need to go to a shelter, Those organizations that you mentioned, are those ones that they could reach out to for of assistance directly?
They could start there, and they unfortunately, with our current system, you may start with an agency and then get referred to a better fit agency for you. So oftentimes this is part of what makes it really difficult to navigate homeless systems. Is this is actually probably contacting coordinated entry would be the best bet, because that's the idea. Is that coordinated entry is doing the triage and making the referrals to the best fit housing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that recommendation. So coordinated entry. And just quickly, again, I just want to, put this information out there. If someone wants to enter that system, what's the process for them to do that?
So I would start by going to the website for the continuum and following the links to coordinated entry, or you could also contact 211 directly.
Thank you. Thank you for providing that information and resources to help. So now let's shift back into kind of the work, the type of work that people are doing to address people who are already homeless. So I'm kind of thinking of, for anyone who is already experiencing homeless, what are some services or programs for them to maybe address mental health concerns, substance abuse, domestic violence? What are resources for those who are already homeless?
Yeah. So agencies that participate in the continuum provide two different types of housing, and that housing comes with a wide array of services. So the first type is called permanent supportive housing. So if you're accepted into that program, they help you find and fund an apartment or shared housing situation. And if you're struggling with substance abuse disorder or DV or mental health, the case managers in those programs will refer you to the services that you need. The other housing type is called rapid rehousing, and that is intended to be a shorter term stay, usually 6 months to 18 months. And that is ideal for someone who's maybe, just slipped into homelessness and needs a hand or a help, and then they're ready to go on their way. So, but again, all those services all those things that you identified, we refer to as the social determinants of health. And those are, do you have a safe place to live? Do you have transportation? Are you experiencing DV? Do you have substance use? Do you need help getting education? Do you need help getting a job? All those social determinants of health are things that HUD programs help address. So all the funding that comes from the continuum of care goes into the programs. The programs then are doing assessing social determinants of health and helping people get on the right track to maintaining their housing. And it kind of leads me into as the continuum, we evaluate each of these programs annually, and what we're evaluating is whether or not they're meeting the basic HUD target. So one target is how good are you at helping people maintain their housing and not fall into homelessness? How good are you at helping people either maintain or increase their income through employment or signing up for any benefits that they might be entitled to? And do they have a medical home? Are they receiving medical care? And then more globally, length of time homelessness before you hit a program, and reducing first time homelessness. So those are the goals we're evaluating for all of our programs that receive that funding.
Okay. And to receive help, if I am experiencing homelessness, I should also go to the coordinated entry system on your website?
Yep.
Okay. And I'm curious, based upon what you're saying about the funding, how do you allocate, how many dollars go to housing versus services? Do you have any kind of breakdown for how you decide how much money is spent on each of these issues?
So HUD gives us a formula, and it's pretty strict, and HUD will only fund specific things. So they're interested in funding housing programs that have services attached.
Okay.
It's a set amount of funding every year. So if you organizations that have received the funding apply every year, and they're ranked. And from highest to lowest in terms of your outcomes. And HUD may cut it off at, like if we rank 1 to 25, they may cut off and say, we're going to fund the first 20. We'll see about the first 5 if we have money left over. So it's a huge incentive for people who are funded to do well by having very good outcomes. So that's how that process works. Yeah.
Interesting. So I know since you do manage funding and decide how it's allocated, do you have any funding opportunities available right now for any service providers?
So we just finished our annual HUD competition. So that big pot of money is closed for this year. But if this is something that anybody listening wants to know more about, I would encourage you to participate in the program review committee, and to learn more about what's required to apply for a grant, because the process just closed, but it's going to start again like in February. We
Oh,
start
wow.
this year, yeah. Because we will evaluate all our programs, see where they stand, we'll ask for a letter of intent sometime in the spring. So if you're interested, now's a good time to learn more about that process. And I lost my train of thought. So where were we going with that question?
Oh, sure. No, you sounded right on track to me. When would that meeting? Yeah, when would do you think that
Okay,
meeting might
there you go. You were asking about municipal funding. So that was the HUD NOFO. And the other funding that will come available in our community is the HAP funding that's funding through the state. And it's administered by the city, the county, and the COC. So each entity gets its own allocation, but we all coordinate with each other to make sure that we're achieving the goals that we want for our community. And as I mentioned before, that funding is currently on hold until Gavin Newsom decides what he needs from us in terms of additional explanations. And then when that happens, the city and the county / continuum will issue requests for proposals. So if that is something you're interested in, just keep your eyes open on the city and county websites.
Okay, so it will be coming up. Do you think it will be around February when that NOFA is released, you were saying? Or would it be prior?
No, well, initially our thought was it was going to be prior. So the HUD NOFO won't be released, and we'll start the process in February. The HAP, lots of acronyms, I'm sorry. The HAP NOFO will be released whenever Gavin Newsom says, okay, I guess.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Like in the next month, but it might be next year. So we'll see.
We're waiting. Gotcha. So I think I'd kind of like to shift gears this time into people who are not homeless, but they are still living in our community, and they're seeing the impact of homeless individuals in their areas. So maybe they're noticing there's a lot more litter on the street near the encampment areas. There might be tents along sidewalks. They're experiencing human waste in public areas, and even property crimes like vandalism, theft, or that impact our business, property owners, and just residents too. So I'm curious, what work is the Continuum of Care doing to kind of address these issues or ameliorate the impact of these issues that other people in the community are experiencing?
Yeah. The Continuum of Care's reach doesn't extend as far as like cleaning up encampments. That's the job of the city. The city working with the police department does that. I would say that what the Continuum does is support those organizations that are plugging away at the problem. I've mentioned, there's just not enough affordable housing. Well, there's just not enough shelter beds or or housing beds to scoop everybody who's in a tent into housing. But it's important that we continue to provide programs that are, those high quality programs that are ranked high on a HUD list, so that we can start chunking away at the problem.
Okay, I totally understand. Is there anything that you might want to suggest to a property owner who is noticing that they're experiencing, chronic trespassing? Maybe there's even a resource they could point people to. Is there any advice you might give to our property owners and business owners who are having these kinds of issues on their properties?
I think developing a good relationship with the city police and city officials, so that they respond to your concerns quickly, is probably the best thing that you can do. I think, if you wanted to interact with the person that you're feeling is causing the problem, you could call coordinated entry and ask if they have somebody who will come out and interview them and get them on the list. I might give that a try. I think all the things that you mentioned are a result of having people living in tents in the sidewalk, but also I think it's important not to paint all homeless people with the same broad brush. That there are also people who are not homeless who are committing theft and vandalism, and it's just kind of good to remember that again. That these are people. These are people in dire circumstances, and
Thank you for the suggestions, and hopefully it will. Some of our businesses and owners kind of think about making sure that they report any incidences to the police, but also maybe if the person seems like they could be engaged, to call the coordinated entry system and see if that might help. It will help the person and it will help the property owner. So yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so now I would like to touch on the fact that the city of Stockton, they recently passed an ordinance which bans camping. This is within 30 feet of parks, underpasses, government buildings, and levees. What does the for the work of Continuum of Care?
Well, honestly, it doesn't impact us, the organization. So the Continuum is just that group of volunteers, and the organizations that are providing the services. It doesn't impact us so much. I think that as advocates, we want to make sure that that homelessness is not criminalized, and so it's hard enough to be homeless without being a criminal on top of it. So, but beyond that, it's really not. That's not our lane.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I just was curious if there was anything at all that might change the work that you do or the services that you might fund, or it might affect the work that they're doing. Not really. It sounds like it just impacts individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So sometimes, I'm sure other people in the community feel the same. It really feels that addressing homelessness, it's a slow process without any immediately visible returns. Sometimes it does feel like you just continue to see more people who are experiencing homelessness. What can you say? What can we expect to see impact-wise in relation to the work of the Continuum of Care in the next 2 years? Is there any kind of visible impact that we can see from the work that you're doing, the funding that you're putting out there in the community? What do you expect to see in terms of changing homeless in the next couple of years?
Well, I am seeing building more affordable housing happening. I'm excited about a project that the Housing Authority is working on through Project Home Key to rehab a property that will then house homeless people. So So I think as these affordable housing projects come online, that will start to address it, but really there's a lot more needed. So that I think that's really the key is how do we support the development, the building of affordable housing in Stockton and in the broader San Joaquin community, so that there are places for people to go.
Okay, so you're looking for that development of affordable housing that you're kind of mentioning before. Okay, and it was interesting that you mentioned that the point in time count saw a reduction in the amount of homeless in our area. So I'm hopeful that maybe we can continue that trend. And even you might even be able to identify why is it shrinking. I'm very curious once you get a chance to examine it to learn about that. Okay, in your opinion, what is the single most important thing that you believe needs to happen in order to help an individual out of homelessness?
So I think I've said this, but we need to go. They need a home. They need a place to live that they can afford and that they can maintain. So we need more affordable housing, and we need, another thought to consider is that the housing authority has been great in issuing vouchers some of you may think of it as the Section 8 program. So if landlords would accept those vouchers, that makes that unit permanently affordable for that person, and it's guaranteed income for the landlord. But a lot of times landlords are they're reluctant. They have a lot of misconceptions about who holds those vouchers, and it's not easy. You may have a voucher, but you just can't find an apartment to use it on. So, one big important thing would be if landlords could accept those vouchers, and that's something we could do quickly. We don't have to wait for a building to be built to do that.
Is there any sort of protection for landlords that do accept those vouchers? Because I'm sure some of them are not as inclined, just they're worried maybe about damage, done to the apartment. Can you tell me a little bit more about how that voucher program works, and if there is anything that can help property owners be more encouraged to go ahead and accept them?
So I would say that when a property owner rents to somebody, to any member of the public, they have no guarantee that that person won't damage the apartment. And I would say it's probably the same as a voucher holder, maybe with the exception that voucher holders are super grateful to have a roof over their heads and to have a place where they're living, and maybe more careful about damages. So being a landlord is not easy, and but you don't know what you're getting when you put anybody. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
There's no guarantees for anybody, to a landlord, that their next tenant is going to be a great tenant. I guess I think what's great for the landlord is that they get that check on the first of the month from the housing authority, and you don't have to chase anybody down to get your rent payment. I think it's a great deal for landlords.
It's consistent. At least they know that the funding is coming through. Okay. So again, affordable housing looks like that's the key. And, in your opinion and from your experience, you just think we need additional units, affordable housing, or people to accept the vouchers that are out there.
Yes.
Okay. What can the general public, business owners, property owners, what can we do as community members to help kind of move the bar in terms of addressing homelessness in our community? Is there anything that the rest of us can do to support the efforts of the Continuum of Care?
I think getting involved, and particularly in the committee work of the Continuum. So we do a lot in those committees. So when you check out the website and you see the list of committees, see one that interests you, and that is is a way that you can contribute right away and learn about the continuum. I would also encourage, like I said, landlords accept those vouchers. If you hear of an affordable development happening in your neighborhood, say yes in my backyard. Oh, yes, we want that. That's helpful. Um, so I think those are the main things that community members could do.
Okay. So get involved, accept vouchers if you are able to. Okay. Is there anything else that you think people should know or understand about homelessness in downtown Stockton, or just the work of the Continuum of Care?
Well, I would say that it's important to know that homelessness comes in all shapes and sizes. So we have worked with people who are seniors over the age of 62, families with small children, youth exiting the foster system, young adults in that age range of 18 to 24 who are also now parents. Um, and so um, many of these are hardworking people who have jobs, and just kind of bearing in mind that um, our residents deserve better, our neighbors deserve better, and I think a lot of times when we talk about the homeless in our mind, we're thinking of a crusty old guy, but that's not the case. It's your grandma, it's your kids, it's your kids' friends. Um, so yeah, I think it's important to remember that and to humanize the face of homelessness.
Right. Remember, each of us could be homeless if just a few things, happened in our lives. So I think that's a really, really important thing to remember. Thank you. Okay, so if people would like to get in touch with you for any further resources, any other information, what's the best way for them to do that?
Um, so I would go through the website again, and ask. You can ask questions there, and then we can funnel it to the right person. And yeah, that is the best way to do that.
Okay. Thank you, Kate, for answering all of my questions. Very interesting to learn about the makeup of our community, the homeless people in our community. Sorry, lost my words there. Um, if it's all right with you, I'd like to move into audience questions. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right, here we go. Okay, we've got a couple. So the first one is from someone named Karen Ruby. She's asking, how can families who are on the verge of homelessness, who are not yet homeless, be helped? So I think we kind of talked about that earlier, but can you maybe highlight some of what we shared?
Yeah, I would get in touch with coordinated entry and see if they have referrals for you. And I think a lot of times just assessing um, what's needed is important. So is it because of a job loss and there needs to be another job? Is it medical problems that need to be addressed? And so I think that you could be helped in that way. A person could be helped.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Karen, for asking your question. So I have another question here. This is from Johnny Palacios. He's asking, first he says, I was so impressed with the new men's shelter expansion and navigation center plans. Has this project been completed? Do you have any
That
idea?
I don't know, but I did see that there was a reply with a link to that. So we have actually a number that we put a lot of funding into shelter expansion in the last couple of years, and some of it's been completed and some of it hasn't. Um, so I would check out that link.
Okay, thank you for the person who replied with some helpful information. And thank you, Johnny, for your question. Okay, let's see if there are any additional ones. Oh, so I do see Benjamin Seffold. Hi, Ben. Um, chimed in with the ribbon cutting information. Okay, so it looks like I don't think we have any additional questions at the moment. So if we still have a couple of minutes, so if you do have a question, go ahead and type it in. In the meantime, I will remind everyone that this video was streaming live on multiple platforms. So we were live on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, where we are at Downtown Stockton. It was also streaming live to Twitter at Downtown STKN. So we do have all of our past videos on the channel if anyone wants to tune in, learn more about the people who are doing great work in our community, resources that can help. So please be sure to follow us, check us out. And I do want to say, oh, it looks like we have an additional question coming in. So this is from Violetta Meza. She's asking, what programs are available for foster youth who are aging out or turning 18? Great question. I know it's a really vulnerable community.
Yes.
Can you share, Kate?
Yes. So in our community and our state, foster youth have the option of going into extended foster care. At age 18 to 21, you may choose an AB-12 program, and those programs are operated in our community by Spearnet and Lutheran Social Services, my agency. There's also after 21, when you're finished with the AB-12 program, you could go into what's called a THP plus NDM program. That's Transitional Housing Program Non-Dependent Minor. And there are programs in Stockton. I'm not familiar with that agency that does that, but they're available in Stockton. So those are two options. And then a third option is to go through coordinated entry, and you can access a permanent supported housing program that's operated by Lutheran Social Services called Timecodes. And so that offers housing and supportive services. So there's an array of programs and housing, and it's super important for any youth who are aging out of foster care to look into what services they're eligible for. Many youth also eligible at Delta College through Guardian Scholars Program that will help you get through college. So there's lots of options available.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering that. And I'm happy to hear there are so many options available for foster youth. Very important time of their life. Once they're exiting the system,
yeah,
it's really hard to find jobs. You need to get training to hopefully help them so that they don't fall into homelessness. It's very important.
Yeah, I feel really passionately about this because statistics show that 30% of those aging out of the foster care system end up being homeless. And so we talked about stopping homelessness on day one for foster youth. So I really highly encourage anybody who's in the foster system to check in with your social worker and see what's available for you once you turn 18.
Thank you, Kate. Okay, so I think, and thank you, Violetta, for your question. I don't see any additional questions. So at this point, Kate, do you have any last things that you'd like to share?
No, I just wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to learn more about the continuum and about the work that the homeless service providers are doing in this community. I really appreciate it.
Amazing. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for all of the great work that you're doing. It's so important, so meaningful for our community. And thank you, viewers, if you tuned in. I appreciate it. And with that, I would like to say thanks, everyone. Have a great day downtown.